It's about 12:30 now, and it was my understanding that about this time there was going to be some people talking, and we're just waiting for that now. There have been quite a few more people come by. Numbers of people honking their horns as they've driven by, giving the thumbs up. Close Guantanamo. We've certainly held on to Guantanamo for a long time. After Dole dominated their economy for so many years, and the American big business taking advantage of their cheap labor in those days, and then they finally went out on their own. They just said enough is enough, and it was quite a to-do for us here in the United States. But we hung on to Guantanamo, and now it's making a very convenient prison for political prisoners and others who are never charged with any crimes. My thinking is that if there were crimes committed, then bring the charges and give them fair trials. Sounds like they're wanting to gather together.
Thank you all for being here. I'm Mary Batson, and I'm with Women in Black, the Medford Women in Black. Just a few words about Medford's Women in Black. We started just prior to the Iraq invasion, and we've been standing every Wednesday. Louder. We've been standing every Wednesday, almost for 9 years. We took a break after the last election, thinking things might change, but we all know how that turned out. So we're back on the corner for the last couple of years, every Wednesday. Women in Black is not an organization, it's a movement of women that originally started in Israel when a group of Palestinian and Israeli women got together to protest the violence there. And it has since spread worldwide. Women in Black stand in many countries and throughout the United States. Medford has, every Wednesday, Ashland has two vigils, one on Friday, one on Saturday. We welcome men to stand with us. And if you think it was kind of boring out here today, it was. If you've been here 9 years ago, it's a lot different. There's a lot of cursing, a lot of spitting, some threats, and we
took some notes and prepared a little speech.
Volunteer with Occupy Medford and volunteered to speak today. Previously I didn't know much about Guantanamo, and there's still more to learn. I just want to say that we should definitely close Guantanamo, especially since it costs us taxpayers $800,000 a year to house one prisoner. That's $16 million a year that we pay in our taxes. Obama has actually tried to shut down Guantanamo several occasions, but has been stopped by Congress. And a pact of 5 individuals who do not want to close Guantanamo. Let's see. Maybe I should have just stuck to the plan and went with my notes. All right. I, for one, never believed that the 2 towers were brought down by terrorists. I feel it was an inside job, so I don't fear any foreign terrorists. And it's not that I fear domestic terrorists like our politicians or individuals who try to limit our rights. And they try to keep us in a fear-based state of mind so that we don't get together to unite. That is their greatest fear, that we will unite. To be a bad person and litter. Actually, I'm sorry, that figure at $800,000 a year for 176 prisoners is $136 million. So, I mean, if we close Guantanamo, it doesn't necessarily mean that those suspected terrorists will be set free. It means that they will come to federal prisons, and where they still may not get a due process or a speedy trial. So we have more work to be done once Guantanamo closes, making sure that their rights and our rights are upheld. And you know, I just feel like it's our money. We have a say in where it's spent, and we can't give up and keep fighting and hoorah! And come to Medford's General Assemblies every Saturday at the library, and let's try and uphold our Constitution. All right, thanks guys for coming out. What's next? All right. Do you need somebody to hold?
After 9/11, with fear and uncertainty and the desire for revenge sweeping the nation, Bush Cheney claimed the right to detain and even to kill suspected terrorists wherever they were found, based on the authorization to use military force. Those people were, and still are, held with no rights, mostly at Guantanamo, but at countless other centers around the world. No rights, no charges, no trials. This was the war on terror, aimed at terrorist activities supposedly related to the 9/11 attacks. Obama embraced that policy and has continued it. Fast forward 10 years. New Year's Eve, 2011. Obama signs into law the National Defense Authorization Act, the military spending bill, having earlier assured us that he would veto it. Hidden in that bill, and now the law, is the power of indefinite detention and an expanded definition of who is subject to it. Now it is anyone who, quote, substantially supported Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, or associated forces, or persons who commit or support a belligerent act against the U.S. or its coalition allies, end quote. The wording is so broad and vague that what exactly is considered terrorist activity or aiding associated forces or a belligerent act is left open to executive interpretation. The President now has the authority to apprehend and detain anyone based solely on suspicion, including American citizens on U.S. soil, and then hold them indefinitely without charge or a trial. Obama stated that he has serious reservations about some of the provisions and that his administration would not authorize indefinite military detention without trial of American citizens. Given his history of some of his promises, that does not give me any confidence. Reports have now surfaced that the Obama administration pushed to have the language prohibiting military detention of American citizens without due process removed from the bill, and for the bill to give the President, not the State Department, the authority for detaining people, and this was accomplished in the final wording. Even if Obama's stated intention is true, there is no guarantee about the attitude or interpretation of future presidents or their advisors. This is now the law of the land. On top of all that, the NDAA also puts heavy restrictions on the transferring of any of those currently at Guantanamo, and of course trying them by military commissions has never been worked out. Is what we are doing here today a belligerent act? If so, we could be spending our futures at Guantanamo. So when we demand the closing of Guantanamo, it's not just closing that physical space. We must end the power of the government to pick up people anywhere it pleases, decides that they are suspicious, lock them up and throw away the key, or even kill them, all in the name of keeping us safe.
Well, go ahead. I'm going to speak.
Hello, my name's Evan Lastly. I'm an organizer with Occupy Ashland. A couple days ago, before the 10th anniversary, there was an editorial which came out in the New York Times called My Guantanamo Nightmare, which I'd like to read to you guys now to really take it home, as this is a story of a man, Lakhdar Boumediene, who spent 7 years in Guantanamo. So, here we go. On Wednesday, America's detention camp at Guantanamo Bay will have been open for 10 years. For 7 of them, I was held there without explanation or charge. During that time, my daughters grew up without me. They were toddlers when I was imprisoned and were never allowed to visit or speak to me by phone. Most of their letters were returned as quote-unquote undeliverable, and the few that I received were so thoroughly and thoughtlessly censored that their messages of love and support were lost. Some American politicians say that people at Guantanamo are terrorists, but I have never been a terrorist. Had I been brought before a court when I was seized, my children's lives would not have been torn apart, and my family would not have been thrown into poverty. It was only after the United States Supreme Court ordered the government to defend its actions before a federal judge that I was finally able to clear my name and be with them again. I left Algeria in 1990 to work abroad. In 1997, my family and I moved to Bosnia and Herzegovina at the request of my employer, the Red Crescent Society of the United Arab Emirates. I served in the Sarajevo office as Director of Humanitarian Aid for children who had lost relatives to violence during the Balkan conflicts. In 1998, I became a Bosnian citizen. We had a good life, but all that changed after 9/11. When I arrived to work on the morning of October 19th, 2001, an intelligence officer was waiting for me. He asked me to accompany him to answer questions. I did so, voluntarily, but afterward I was told I could not go home. The United States had demanded that local authorities arrest me and 5 other men. News reports at the time said the United States believed that I was plotting to blow up its embassy in Sarajevo. I had never for a second considered this. The fact that the United States had made a mistake was clear from the beginning. Bosnia's highest court investigated the American claim, found that there was no evidence against me, and ordered my release. But instead, the moment I was released, American agents seized me and 5 others. We were tied up like animals and flown to Guantanamo, the American naval base in Cuba. I arrived on January 20th, 2002. I still had faith in American justice. I believed my captors would quickly realize their mistake and let me go. But when I would not give the interrogators the answers they wanted, how could I, when I had done nothing wrong? They became more and more brutal. I was kept awake for many days straight. I was forced to remain in painful positions for hours. These are the things I do not want to write about. I want only to forget. I went on a hunger strike for 2 years because no one would tell me why I was being imprisoned. Twice each day my captors would shove a tube up my nose, down my throat, and into my stomach so that they could pour food into me. It was excruciating, but I was innocent, and so I kept up my protest. In 2008, my demand for a fair legal process went all the way to America's highest court. In a decision that bears my name, the Supreme Court declared that the laws and Constitution are designed to survive and remain in force in extraordinary times. It ruled that prisoners like me, no matter how serious the accusations, have a right to a day in court. The Supreme Court recognized a basic truth: the government makes mistakes. And the court said that because the consequence of error may be a detention of persons for the duration of hostilities that may last a generation or more, that is a risk too significant to ignore. 5 months later, Judge Richard J. Leon of the Federal District Court in Washington reviewed all the reasons offered to justify my imprisonment, including secret information I never saw or heard. The government abandoned its claim of an embassy bomb plot just before the judge could hear it. After the hearing, he ordered the government to free me and 4 other men who had been arrested in Bosnia. I will never forget sitting with the 4 other men in a squalid room at Guantanamo, listening over a fuzzy speaker as Judge Leon read his decision in a Washington courtroom. He implored the government not to appeal his ruling, because 7 years of waiting for our legal system to give them an answer to a question so important is, in my judgment, more than plenty. I was freed at last on May 15th, 2009. So I will continue. It goes on for talk about his impressions and how he feels now. And besides the fact that it has set some legal precedents, it has made a dent, and his story is getting out there. You know, this won't end until the U.S. government really resolves not to contradict its own statements on human rights and to respect the international law that says that you cannot torture human beings, especially during extraordinary times. And I think that's what this is about. Is though I don't believe that 9/11 was an inside job, I think that the war on terror has been conceived as being so vague that it allows for this gray area, and that is the whole sort of purpose of Guantanamo, is creating that legal gray area where they can do what they want rather than respect any sort of legal or moral obligations, which are they have to serve during these times, and they cannot be stopped, they cannot be prevented, because some people consider that we are living in extraordinary circumstances. And so, you know, just don't forget about the people who are out there. That is one of the things he brings up, is he knows people who are still there, and he's working to try to get them out. And so long as we continue to come out and make sure that the rest of our society doesn't forget that this is still something which exists, that there is still this place where people can be tortured. And with the National Defense Authorization Act, as was mentioned, this gray area is being expanded. And we haven't seen its consequences yet, but I think we are entering dangerous times. And we do not have the assurance, perhaps, that we felt we once had, that our civil liberties will be guaranteed, even if we are simply peaceful protesters demanding change. And so, but don't give up, keep hope, and remember that if somebody can survive 7 years in Guantanamo, then we can keep doing what we're doing. Thank you.
Could you read his name again?
His name was Lakhdar Boumediene, and it was an editorial published a couple days ago in the New York Times, if anybody's interested.
My name's John Roshek. I'm also supporting Occupy Ashland's. One thing that I read is that a lot of the people who've been incarcerated at Guantanamo, who've been able to have friends or family support them in their nations, you know, Britain, Australia, etc., have been able to find a way to get out. But there's many who's, for instance, there's I think about 6 or more from Yemen, and their relatives don't have access to the media in order to so basically they're stuck there. I mean, there's been hundreds released because so they're totally dependent, particularly on us stepping up and advocating for them and trying to get it introduced into the American legal system. So.
Do you know how many are still in Guantanamo? How many are still there?
176.
176.
And at one point I think there was 600 in there.
Anyone else like to speak?
Oh, maybe
Alan?
Thanks. Hi, I'm Alan Hallmark. I just wanted to say that on my way over here, I was listening to NPR's Talk of the Nation, and they had an author on there who had just written a book about how the Nuremberg trials are a precedent for what's going on at Guantanamo and around the world today, and with the so-called Al-Qaeda terrorists. And he was totally justifying Guantanamo and the process of dealing with our so-called terrorists today, saying that the Nazi prisoners at Nuremberg had way fewer rights than the prisoners in Guantanamo. And he just glossed over the fact that these people have been held there for 9-10 years. You know, what kind of process is that? I think the Nuremberg trials were over and done with in a much, much shorter time. And so I would call that a much fairer process than the one we have now. So there's a lot of propaganda that comes out to us over the news media, and we have to be careful and talk to folks about, you know, what the realities are. I've worked for the Federal Public Defender's Office in Portland and in Medford for a number of years as an investigator. and I left at the end of 2005. At about that time, they were finally getting lawyers for the defendants in Guantanamo, and some of my my colleagues at the Federal Public Defender's Office were sent to Guantanamo to try to defend these people, and also sent to Afghanistan and other places, to other smaller prisons where these prisoners have been kept. So it's not just Guantanamo. But they don't want to bring them to the United States, which they should do. They should be brought to prisons in the United States and be, held and charged in federal court, where they get all the rights that they're entitled to. And until that happens, this is not a fair process and never will be a fair process. So I really appreciate all of those who've spoken and brought us some really good information this morning, and thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
Anyone else?
Hi, my name is Raven Playfair. No relationship to Ben, but at least not in recent generations. I am working with Occupy Ashland myself, and this coming Saturday I'm going to also be doing some educational workshops, or I don't know if I'd call them workshops, at least this Saturday, at the Center for Creative Change that has just opened up. If you haven't been in yet, come and visit us if you can, if you're there on Saturday. I will be, let's see, how do I describe this? Playing some auditory CDs that are educational CDs about the Federal Reserve Bank. And if you don't know what the Federal Reserve Bank has to do with 9/11, you might want to come and educate yourself and find out. This Saturday I'm only going to be playing 3 of the CDs that I have. Later I will be doing a 21-week course. This is a very informational packet of information. It covers a lot of different topics, including 9/11, including the history of the Federal Reserve Bank and how it was created here in America. I'm getting ready to go to California and do some research for Occupy Ashland on homeless issues and on what the different occupations are doing with their money. We're trying to create a new system here and possibly new forms of currency, or at least to reclaim the Federal Reserve Bank for the people and not for the Rothschilds and the JP Morgans of the world. So if you're interested, get in touch with me or come by the Center for Creating Change on Saturday. We'll also be doing some video playing about the Federal Reserve, and also some auditory CDs of Marshall Rosenberg's work, Nonviolence Communication. He's the author of the book Nonviolence Communication. Yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to say, and look forward to seeing y'all in Ashland.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you.
See you Martin Luther King Day, lots of events in Ashland, and film showings in the evening at SOU Library. So hopefully see you guys there.
Did you see the letter to the editor?
Did you see? Oh, I didn't.
By the way, the time on Saturday is from noon to 5 at the center. It's at 320 East Main Street, that's the corner of 2nd and 8th.